Kutaki no Ha, episode 23, Wednesday, July 19th, 2006. Welcome to Kutaki no Ha, the podcast dedicated to the Bujinkan martial arts of Masaaki Hatsumi Soke and to the spirit of cooperation and friendship in the Bujinkan community. I'm Shawn, your host. This is Kutaki no Ha episode 23, and we're coming out about 1 week later than I planned to originally, and that's because Rob and I got our feet off the ground with this episode a little bit late, and then my work week hit and I was unable to get anything done due to long work shifts. And as a matter of fact, I'm at work right now, having just finished a night shift, and wanted to just crank this episode out on my laptop before I go home and fall asleep. And so that's why I'm in a different room than usual, and I don't have my headset. And so I think the volume might be a little bit lower than usual, but I'm trying to speak directly into the mic here on my laptop, so hopefully it works out okay. To start things off this episode, I'd like to thank people who left feedback and comments on the Kutaki no Ha podcast blog page, which is located at www.kutaki.org/podblog. I appreciate the feedback there. Thanks also to everyone who voted at Podcast Alley for Kutaki no Ha. We're still not exactly in the top 3 or anything, but we have pretty respectable standing considering the category that we're in and the subject, which probably isn't the most popular subject, although there are some other martial arts podcasts out there. I think it's becoming a bit of a more popular and well-known medium. So hopefully, at least within the martial arts category, we can keep up a pretty high ranking. So thanks to everyone who voted in June, and if you haven't voted in July yet, please head over to Podcast Alley and do that. There's a direct link to the page at Podcast Alley from the pod blog page, if you want to jump straight to the page where you can vote for this podcast. I'm still trying to get my act together to get you guys some music on the podcast. Music.podshow.com is still not letting me log in, and they still haven't given me a satisfactory answer to my question about why I can't log in and why I can't get my password mailed to me. So if I can't get anything happening with that by the time the next episode is going to come out, I'm just going to create a whole new account at their site, and so I can finally look for some pod-safe music for you guys. So unfortunately, there's no extra music this episode, so sorry to all you ambient lovers out there. You're not going to get your fix this time. The next episode will probably be released about a week from now when I release this one, next week, and this coming weekend, I'm going to be away in Togakushi Mountain, which is the modern pronunciation for Togakure Mountain. I take my dojo group up there every year for a hiking, camping, and training trip. And this year, it's time for our 6th anniversary trip. The dojo's been going for 6 years. We've been going up there every year, and it's always been a good time. And I'm hoping to take my laptop up there with me and maybe get some of my dojo group members on the next episode with maybe some thoughts about what their training experiences are like and what they think of Togakushi Mountain and this kind of thing. So we can look forward to that hopefully in next episode. Again, that should be released about a week from today, sometime around July 24th or so. This week, though, I know that some of you have been waiting for your Rob Renner fix, so we're going to get into his training segment now. And this week, Rob is going to talk to us about initial contact. So here he is.
Hello, I'm Rob Renner, and welcome to the training segment of the Kutaki no Ha podcast. Today we're going to talk about initial contact. Initial contact is the part of the technique where you actually come to grips with your attacker. In the first segment, we talked about primary distance. Primary distance, we learned how to judge the maximum effective range of our attackers and how to position ourselves well balanced just outside that effective range. In segment 2, we talked about closing the distance, being at a safe place outside the effective range, and how to move efficiently to a safe place inside our attacker's range. Now we're going to be talking about initial contact. In initial contact, there are several key points to keep in mind. The first is how much pressure. A ruling principle in Budo Taijutsu is to use the least amount of tension necessary to get the job done well. As Hatsumi Sensei is constantly admonishing us, don't grab your opponent. Attach to your opponent or stick to your opponent, but don't grab him. We can visualize saran wrap. When you put saran wrap on food to put it in your refrigerator for preservation, saran wrap completely covers the food, but doesn't force it to go in any particular direction. Try to be like the saran wrap. The second key point about this is multiple points of contact. When you do make initial contact with your opponent, try to be making as much contact as possible. Don't use just your hands. Use your forearms as well. Use your head, your chest, stomach, hips, knees. Make lots of contact. It gives you a tremendous amount of kinesthetic feedback for your brain to know almost ahead of what your opponent is thinking where he's going to be moving to. So, multiple points of contact. Light pressure, just covering your opponent, like saran wrap. Next, I want to talk about keeping the structure the same. This is going to be a little bit more difficult concept to grasp. When your opponent and you make that initial contact, your two bodies now become a single entity, so to speak, at least temporarily. In fact, your center of gravity is changed to a center of gravity somewhere between your two bodies. The idea of his tension and your tension, how you hold your body up, how he holds his body up, where he's moving, where you're moving, you're now a single entity. And that's okay. If I took a snapshot at the exact moment that you two made impact or contact, that would be the structure. In initial contact, you want to practice keeping the initial structure the same for a brief moment while you take control of your opponent's balance. How are we going to do that? Well, there is some slack in the body's balancing mechanism. Between being perfectly balanced and actually falling, there is slack, usually a few inches. You can practice this on yourself to find out. Stand upright, perfectly balanced. Now start to lean out, putting your weight out over your toes, up until the point at which you're going to fall, or where you feel you have to take a step. Going from perfectly balanced to falling. You can see that your body will actually move several inches. It's that slack between being perfectly balanced and falling that we want to play with on our opponent, because you'll notice that the point just before you actually have to take a step and fall, you're not very strong. Your body and your brain is working as to keep you upright. Deliver an attack at that moment would be incredibly difficult. So, when we make initial contact, we want to keep our pressure light, have multiple points of contact. The point at which we make contact, we want to keep the structure the same while we move him in that slack zone. Once we move him in that slack zone, we've taken control of his balance. The way that we're going to do this is by moving our feet. You're going to keep your upper body still. You're going to keep your upper body in the same position at which you make initial contact. So the exercise for this is going to be next. But I just want to reiterate, the least amount of pressure necessary to do the job well, multiple points of contact, keeping the structure the same while you move them in that slack zone between being perfectly balanced and actually falling. Now let's do an exercise to help us kind of get a feel for this initial contact. Have your partner standing with his hands at his sides, fairly relaxed, and you're going to move up to him on his side. We'll come at him from his right side. Coming at him from his right side, you're going to move up to him with your arms outstretched, almost like the Frankenstein monster. And you're going to move all the way till your chest makes contact with his shoulder. What this is going to do is allow you to move up and make contact and actually shift his weight to his left side. You're going to shift his weight with your chest. So right off the bat, in this initial contact, you've slightly taken him. This is what I mean by moving his structure. Your bodies make contact, and then you use your feet to actually push him over a little bit. You don't want him falling. You don't want him going so far to the left that he actually has to take a step, because then he'll just regain his superior balance and be prepared for what you do next. You want to move him to where his weight is shifted over, but he hasn't yet fallen. So with our arms outstretched, he's inside our hug zone. He's within the area of our being able to hug him. So what you're going to do now is just place your right hand on his left shoulder and place your left hand on his left hip, just above his rear. And from there, you have your forearm resting against his chest on your right side and your left forearm against his back. Your chest should be making contact with his arms and probably your belly. Your knees can also be making contact with his legs. So you are saran wrapping onto him. From this point, you can take a step either to the left or the right while keeping the structure of your upper body the same. You'll find that you can kind of twist him around just by stepping around to one side or the other until his balance is broken. Don't let him fall. Just move until he feels his balance is broken. The next training segment is going to deal with what to do after we've taken his balance. So once again, to reiterate, we want to have the least amount of pressure necessary, multiple points of contact, keeping the structure the same while we take his balance. So in this exercise, I call it the hug and drop, and we'll get to the drop in the next segment, but we're going to move up to our partner's right side, keep him inside our hug zone, in other words, within the space at which we would hug somebody, and make contact with him with our right arm and our left arm, and then start to walk around him just enough to take his balance, but where he's not falling. I know this idea of initial contact and the exercise itself is going to be a little bit strange for you right at first, especially if you've never seen it done or had it done to you. But as in all the exercises that we give here, play with them. Take some time, experiment, see what you can come up with, see what discoveries you can make yourself. For that's what the true progress of Budo is about, is making these discoveries for yourself. Guidance helps, and once again, these exercises I show you are not the only ones to help you get good at Budo Taijutsu. These are just ones that have been found to be very powerful and proven very effective at teaching and understanding of Hatsumi Sensei's movement. I encourage all the listeners not to get too bogged down in details. Everyone has a slightly different background, and I know most of our listeners may or may not be native English speakers, so I try to keep the terminology as simple as possible and the ideas and visualizations as simple as possible. I did have one instance where someone with a very strong background in anatomy and physiology was questioning finding the focal point in primary distance. And because they understood how the musculature attaches to the spinal cord and where it does, they questioned the shoulder girdle attaching to the spine. Well, the point is not which tendon and ligaments attach to which cervical vertebrae or which thoracic vertebrae or what have you, but finding your opponent's arm length. A tailor would do it by measuring the same place from the middle of the back on the spine out to the fingertips is how we measure it. He would measure it out to his wrist to find out what the sleeve length needs to be. So that's what we're really looking for. The focal point is behind the hollow of the throat at the spine. Behind the hollow of the throat at the spine. I'm not really concerned about the exact anatomy of it, and it doesn't matter for most of our listeners. What it's about is finding the range, because from that point to the fingertip or to the weapon tip is his maximum range. If you can know where the focal point is, you'll know where the weapon is. So once again, don't get too caught up in the small details that may or may not be relevant. Try to play with the exercises, see what you discover, and once again, have fun with your training. I'm Rob Brenner. You can contact me at mindwrench, MINDWRENCH, at gmail.com. That's MINDWRENCH WRENCH@gmail.com, or of course PM me at the Kutaki website. Have a great training, and I look forward to talking to you on the next Kutaki podcast.
Thanks very much, Rob. Rob can also be reached by email at his kutaki.org address, rob@kutaki.org, if that's easier for any of you to remember. Rob's segments seem to have been getting more popular, and so it's good to have people giving feedback on his segment, and hopefully that'll continue. We're actually getting a bit close to the end of this episode now. I'm keeping this one a bit short because I want to just get it out to you guys as quickly as possible, and also again because we don't have any music or any other interviews or anything this episode. So I hope we can get back on track with the regular format in the next few weeks. One thing I did want to mention this episode though was a cool thread on the Kutaki forums at kutaki.org. In the Soapbox forum, there are a couple of guys who have decided to do a Bujinkan road trip, and it's in the Soapbox forum, and the thread is called Bujinkan Road Trip, funny enough. And what these guys have done is they started a thread and previous to this one, and they let people know that they're going to be driving across the United States, and they tried to find a bunch of dojos that they could hook up with across the country and train, and basically train their way across the country doing this road trip. And through connecting with people on the Kutaki website, they actually found like quite a few dojos that they could stop at along the way and train. And they also have a road trip blog, which is linked in the first post there in the road trip thread, that you can click on and look at and follow them kind of along their road trip across the country. And I thought this was really cool because it really shows how the community website of Kutaki can really be used to coordinate really cool kind of trips and events and things like this. And this is a pretty like unique thing as far as I've heard. I mean, I know that people go on road trips and they drive to big seminars and stuff like that and might hit a couple dojos along the way. But to plan a trip on like a community website and just try to get as many dojos to go to as possible, I thought it was a pretty unique idea, and kudos to those guys for putting this together. And let's keep an eye on their blog so that we can kind of follow them along and see how they're doing. That's about it for this episode. I'm just going to sign off here and get this one out to you guys as quickly as I can. Again, hope to catch you again in a week or so. So have a good rest of the week and a good weekend, and we'll talk to you again in a few days. Bye.